Welcome back to Shock's Talks. I'm Shakti, and today we're going to be talking about The Fourth Mind by Whitley Strieber. And I've just finished part 1, so I'm 108 pages in, and I already have 9 pages of notes typed up. So I want to do this in 2 parts. Today we'll cover part 1, and in the future we'll do part 2. And I'm so delighted to announce that I'm using an actual podcasting microphone today. I hope you like it. It's been about 2 years of making this channel, and I've really just been focusing on the research and not putting extra energy into like learning editing skills or buying fancy equipment because I need to read and I only have so much time. So a tiny upgrade for you because I love you. I hope you like it. I hope it makes it a better experience for everyone. So let's get into it. This book was published in 2024, and for any of you who are new to this, you know, Whitley Strieber is the famous abductee and experiencer who wrote the book Communion, and Communion was a big deal for a lot of people. It actually triggered a lot of memories for people who had contact and abduction experiences when they saw the image on the cover. So this is a very similar image to what you see on the cover of Communion, but there's a difference, and it's the eyes. On the Communion cover, it just has the black eyes. Here we see what's underneath that black eye covering. And interesting story about this image, Whitley Strieber actually had what's called an eidetic image in his mind of this face, and then he communicated it to an artist to create that iconic cover. So I'm going to start reading you some of my notes. The Fourth Mind is the first book ever to explore the anatomy, brains, genetics, beliefs, and capabilities of the unknown entities the author refers to as the visitors. He maintains that they have a set of abilities he describes as a fourth mind that includes such powers as telepathy, levitation, the ability to move heavy objects without machinery, and many others. So this is just from the book jacket, just to give you an idea of what this book is about. So part 1 is about the visitors who enter and leave at will, coming from parts unknown. It's about their anatomy, genetics, brains, how their minds work, consciousness, and why they are here, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And part 2 is about us, what we were like, what our world was like, and when we had the same powers as them, why we lost them, and how to regain them. He says a catastrophe that almost drove us to extinction caused us to lose contact with important strengths of mind that have been dormant within us ever since. We lost our memory of the way our mind can influence the physical world. Now that part is the part that intrigues me the most because, as you know, if you've been watching Shock's Talks, I'm super into consciousness, and consciousness studies are all about how our minds can influence the physical world. And gaining a better understanding of the nature of reality is one way to move past the limiting beliefs that may be blocking us from our innate abilities. They want to rescue us from the disaster we're in, is something that he's saying in this book. And we've reacted to them as wild animals would to a captor. So the visitors' efforts have been met with terror, obsessive secrecy, orchestrated derision, and gunfire. We can do better, and this is the place to start. Demythologize the visitors. So this is a goal of Whitley's in this book. It's like he wants to help us to understand them in order to demythologize them so that we can have a better relationship to them. And he talks a lot about how we're not going to move forward with all of this through government programs. It's not going to be about some big disclosure that gets us through this process. It's really about us learning to interact with these visitors. So I love this approach. It's kind of like the grassroots contact approach. You know, it's like, what can we all do to learn and be better prepared for these relationships? They are not only here to help us, but they have wants and needs too. So this is what he gets into towards the end of part 1. And it's really interesting how he lays out this. He touches on a lot of UFO history and contact history. he's about 80 now, I think, and he's been in this for so long. His experiences started back in the 80s, and it's 2025 now. And he was a writer before he even started having these experiences, so he has a very beautiful way of reflecting on what he's been through and what he's learned about, kind of an artistic soul. And this book is really blowing me away because I just read Communion right before this. And I feel like I can experience his growth as a soul and as a writer by comparing these two, because his personality is there in both of them, but this one is just so rich and detailed, and you really feel like you're speaking with a master. Like he's really reached this level of deep understanding, and he's still speculating and questioning and, trying to make sense of things that are almost intangible, but he's doing such an expert job in this book. So I do highly recommend reading it if you have the time. It's just so rich with detail, and like I said, in just 108 pages, I just feel like I could have written like 20 pages of notes, but I tried to slim it down so I could fit it into an episode. Because it's just so much detail. So he talks about their bodies, how they can control density and appearance in ways that we cannot, except that we actually can. So he'll get into that later. And the goal here is to awaken what he calls the fourth dimensional mind. We are locked in a three-dimensional mind, and they are in a fourth dimensional mind, and we need to get on that level. So he talks about his own experience, how they communicate with him, and sometimes simple, blunt communication occurs, similar to how we lash out to animals when we're training them. So he says they lash out, and it's not pleasant, but it's not evil. And the way he describes it and talks about it is kind of like, it's like you have to get a louder signal to get through, to be heard. And so sometimes when they want to make a point, it's like very pronounced or dramatic, He talks a lot in this first part about time and their relationship to time. And for them, little that happens can never be surprising, but for us, every second is always new. And he kind of brings back this point towards the end. This is from the beginning, but towards the end of part 1, he gets back into this. And so we'll get more into detail around what he's talking about there later in these notes. And he says that they're trapped in a prison of knowledge, and we can help them spring the trap, and they can help us recover the fourth mind. So he's kind of setting the stage for what all of this is going to be about. And he also refers to them as like midwives to our birth, which is really interesting because, in consciousness studies and spiritual communities, you hear a lot about like going to the fifth dimension or leveling up or having an awakening or an ascension. And this is his version of explaining what that is, how we need to actually get to this next level of our own being in order to have a more fruitful relationship with them, and that they could perhaps be the midwives to that process for us in some kind of way, which seems possible to me. And early on, he starts to describe like why he's qualified to speak on this. And for those of you who don't know his work and haven't listened to his interviews, or, I've actually met him in person. I met him at Contact in the Desert, which is really cool. And I will always be so happy that I've had those experiences where I get to say later, like, yes, I met Whitley and had a brief conversation with him while he was still here. But anyway, he's had his experiences, but he also has, people in the community that he's been able to talk to over the years to get information. He's obviously done extensive research. He talks specifically about General Arthur Exon, a family friend who worked at Wright Field, which is Wright-Patterson now, and that was in 1947. This person was officially tasked with working on the whole, post-Roswell. So, apparently the bodies were brought there, and General Arthur Exon was a part of that. And so that's one of his points of contact who he's been able to speak extensively with. And then he also mentions David Grush, Lou Elizondo, his own experiences, and lays out his goal again. So Here's a quote from the book. "I want us to reach a point where we can have open contact on a personal basis that is both fruitful and meaningful to both sides and advances mankind toward an eventual goal of becoming a cosmic species, which I define as one that understands reality well enough to traverse space and time in the same way that our visitors do, whatever that is. We must be careful, though. They have made their own mistakes on their journey of life, and, in the end, I suspect that seeing if we can help them correct some of them is yet another reason they are here. Theirs is a rescue mission, but they are not just trying to rescue us, but also themselves. Wary of revealing what they want from us, they creep into our lives by night and steal it. There is a better way." He's a little dramatic, and I like that about his writing style, too. So let's see. Okay, I've shared this little passage on TikTok. By the way, if you're new to this channel, I really hope you'll subscribe to it. If you're on TikTok, you can follow me there too as Shocks Talks. I'm still trying to get a feel for that platform. I guess it's just, I don't know. I'm trying to post little snippets. It's a little more casual and more personal, but actually this is where I feel the most happy and the most comfortable. So I'm never going to stop doing this, but I was kind of hoping that like maybe that would be a way for me to connect with more people that would be interested in this content. But the algorithm doesn't want you talking about YouTube on TikTok. So I'm just like posting random little tidbits and hoping people will look at my profile and then look at this channel. But so far it's not really yielding a great result, so who knows. I'm always trying different things, but anyway, I shared this over there, but I'm going to read it to you again because it's interesting. Another quote from the book. "So there is much known about UAPs and some of their occupants within the US defense establishment, but it is concentrated on aspects like materials and biology, not so much on aims and motives and the needs behind them, let alone their relationship to the ineffable and intricately resonant part of us that we call the soul, which I always hesitate to bring up because doing so causes so many people to go instantly into denial. From my perspective, this is because our ever more complex and aggressive material culture has imposed a kind of anesthesia on us. We can no longer detect this part of our normal humanity. By contrast, our visitors are not only capable of understanding the less dense but coherent aspects of personhood, this is their foundational reality. The bodies we will be discussing are to them more like suits of clothes are to us than prisons which can be escaped only at death." So this idea that their bodies are kind of things that they can produce and discard and inhabit and leave at will is a big part of the biology details that he gets into. But if you study like yoga, for example, or many other religions, there's a lot of talk of this same kind of concept, that we humans, like I grew up on a yoga ashram, and one of the chants that they translated to English that we would chant during like kirtan is like, "I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, immortal self I am." And so that was always like brainwashed into me at an early age, and I heard it and I got it, but I don't feel it in my everyday experience. I don't feel that I have the power to just leave this body at will, which is a goal of mine. Not that I want to leave permanently. I want to live out my life, but I want to have the at will out of body experience, be able to go out and come back in. Through my research, especially digging into Tom Campbell's work, I've come to realize that the body itself isn't as physical as we think it is. This is all virtual. It's all information-based, and consciousness is computing that information. So everything that's kind of the area of study that actually makes it all feel more accessible and easy, because when we think of things as so physical and real, it's really hard to make that leap into like leaving the body. But when you think of it as just data streams and your consciousness can just switch between the different data streams, it feels much more accessible and easy to me. So I think that we're way closer than any of us even think to being able to have all of these same abilities that the visitors have and that have been described in religions worldwide throughout time. But we still have a few steps to go, it seems like, and maybe they can help us with some of those. Oh no, I feel a sneeze. Don't. Okay. All right, so Far From Home, I believe this is chapter 1. Far From Home, chapter 2. All right, so the classic gray alien. All right, so towards the beginning of the book, he gets really into the details of the biology, which I'll be honest, I don't really care. Because like I just said, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. Immortal self I am, and I feel the same about them. But if you're super into the details of like the chromosomes and how they excrete, like their waste, and how their eyes work, and how many quadrants are in their brain, and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of details in here about that. I'll kind of lightly touch on some of them. Again, he is taking his own experiences and extrapolating based on what he has seen and learned from them. And he's also referring a lot to this Reddit document. And let's see, page 221. So in the appendix here, you have the information from this document, and it's from December 26, 2002. There's a witness, a notary, an address from Roswell, New Mexico. This person is retired and claims to have been stationed at the Roswell Army Air Base in Roswell, New Mexico. Talks about their experience. I haven't read all of this yet. I've just been listening to Whitley refer to it. But anyway, this is like a molecular biologist talking about how basically they have direct information about the cadavers, the bodies that were brought back and studied. So I'll read this as I get through the whole book, but throughout part 1, he refers to the document quite a bit, and he pulls little pieces of it out. So anyway, let's just talk about some of it. So they are the small, slim, little classic gray aliens with a thin neck and a big head, and they wear like a bodysuit typically. People think that bodysuit has to do with how they excrete waste through their skin, so kind of like this, like sort of like a sweat that comes out through every pore, but that's like how they pee and poop, I guess, and it comes off in like little flaky sheets, and he actually saw them like removing it from themselves at one point in one of his abduction experiences. But apparently it smells really bad too, and hence the little suit. And the black eyes, people think maybe a covering over their regular eye, but nobody's totally sure about that. And they typically, this type has 3 fingers and 1 thumb, but they talk a lot about this strange movement of the fingers and how they don't have like hand muscles like we do, but all the muscles are in the fingers, and the fingers can all articulate like little snakes. So even without a quote unquote thumb, because Whitley says it's more like they have 4 fingers, but one kind of functions as a thumb. All of the fingers can articulate. So they're able to do a lot with them, obviously, when they're doing these procedures and things. And they think that part of the cattle mutilation phenomena might have to do with like them needing to eat the blood, and that they need the copper specifically from the blood. And later on in some of the discussion of like the Varginha, Brazil aliens that were also taken in and studied a little bit, they noticed something in the hemoglobin that indicates like a high copper content. But there were also contradictions. Like another one was more, it sounded like there was more iron. So their blood does seem to be similar to human blood though, which is kind of interesting. So these are like physical, real things in our reality. These are not light beings, you know what I mean? They've been studied, and they've been cut open, and samples have been taken and put under a microscope. And I'll tell you a really crazy story about that later here that he shared in the book that I had never heard before. bodies from the beyond. While they can sometimes seem capable of almost instantaneous motion, they can also achieve a level of stillness that is almost uncanny. In fact, when they disappear before our eyes, I wouldn't be surprised to find that this is because they became so still that our brains, which have been processing them as being in motion, come to the conclusion that they are no longer present. So there are a lot of accounts of people seeing them like in their rooms, or like they move in these different ways. They can hover, they can float, they can move really fast. They can kind of be here and then be right there in an instant, kind of like the way the craft do, you know? And they can hold so still that they can disappear. Or maybe they can just phase out of reality. He's just kind of speculating that maybe it's the stillness that causes us to stop perceiving them. But maybe they're actually disappearing in some other way. We don't know. And he does emphasize that he sees them as discrete individuals with both a communal presence and self-identification, not a faceless hive. So they're not just a hive mind. They are like us. They have individual personalities. But some of them do seem to be more like soldiers in an army, for example. You know, like they appear to be similar based on the behavior during the function that they're carrying out. So there might be like, you know, in a lot of abductions, the doctor character, people say, like the main one that's doing all the work, and then all the other little workers running around. So they have organization. And he talks a lot about what they want from us, and we'll get more into that later on too. The Reddit document even talks about their spiritual beliefs. And for Whitley, he says this has significantly clarified the situation. So in The Kindness of Strangers, which is chapter 4, it starts off with, "This is the story of a gift given to us at the cost of an unknown life from a distant place. This gift could be the basis for a recovery over the next few decades of a lost way of being human, which has the potential to revise the fundamental meaning of our lives and grant us a far better chance of long-term survival than we presently have any reason to expect." So he's basically saying, like, we are screwed and we need their help, is like one way you could interpret this. They need us too. So that's why the name of the book Communion was chosen, because, and he talks more about that idea of communion at the very end of part 1 here, but it's really about like a partnership. Like we need to partner up with these beings, according to him. Not that we need to, but that it could be good, you know? Maybe that we need to. Maybe because like if we don't, we're headed towards total destruction is the basic idea. It's like humankind is on a crazy path. There's a lot of good in the world, but there's like so much bad, as we all know and feel and see and hear about all the time. And it's extreme. It's extreme, you know? So many of the visitors have warned people about, don't damage the environment, love your planet, take care of your planet, stay away from nuclear weapons. But what do? We just keep going in the exact opposite direction of what they've recommended. So part of us ascending is also like caring enough to not make the choices that lead to that kind of self-destruction. And then he gets really into the Brazil stuff. So this is cool. So Brazil is the country with, according to Whitley, arguably the most powerful and provocative history of UFO encounters in the world. The number of cases in that country is so extensive, even a condensed version could fill an entire book. So on August 9th, 1976, in Varginha, Brazil, Cecilio Higinio Pereira saw a light in the sky that came closer and almost pinned him to the ground. The craft was so close, he could reach up and touch it. He felt a cold wind and heard a faint humming sound. There was a smell of sulfur in the air, and he could see 3 men, 3 to 4 feet tall, inside the object, which was translucent. Now, this is from a book by Bob Pratt called UFO Danger Zone that Whitley refers to here. And I've never heard of this story. I've never heard of this like invisible craft either. It's kind of cool, interesting. But it's not a good ending because almost immediately he felt sick and began throwing up, spitting up bile, and suffering mostly from the dry heaves. He ran the rest of the way home and as fast as he could continued to throw up the rest of the night. It was the beginning of a sickness that eventually ended in his death. So Whitley's starting off with this story, but he gets into all these different stories that happened in Brazil, and then he's comparing like the nature of contact and abduction in like the southern hemisphere versus the northern, because there are so many differences, and a lot of the things that were happening in Brazil actually felt like really like attacks and assaults, and people were really scared and lots of bad things were happening. So he says the main difference between abduction cases from the 70s in places like the US, Australia, and to some extent other countries versus Brazil is that the first category included stories of abductions happening at night. So like in the US, we hear a lot about like being taken like right out of your bed while you're sleeping. And this was happening pretty carefully with little damage. Sometimes there are physical traces, confused memories, but deaths and disappearances were not being reported. In Brazil, people were being taken in broad daylight while awake, usually outdoors, and they were often injured and always terrified. And this is mostly in the 70s when a lot was happening. And so Whitley says it almost seems like in the north people were being chosen, in the south they were being hunted down at random after being spotted. Why? Why is this the case? We don't know. Was it different types of beings? Were there different kinds of agreements with the governments in these different countries? That's what some people have speculated over the years. We don't know. He doesn't really get into what he thinks. He's just pointing out the differences in the cases, you know? So there's like these big bodies of like stories and cases and research and incidents and striking differences in these two major categories, in these two locations. And some of the people in Brazil felt that the beams of light were extracting blood from their bodies, but they had no way to know. So that's interesting only because we know like with cattle mutilation, that is something that happens to the cows, and maybe that was happening to the humans. But there was no evidence of that. Colares is a place in Brazil that had numerous UFO-generated assaults, and the Brazilian Air Force conducted an extensive investigation in 1977 and 1978. Between 200 and 300 people were interviewed. On January 20th, 1996, in Virginia, a series of unusual events unfolded. Oh no, the sneeze is coming back. Okay, so this is written about in Dr. Roger Lear's book, UFO Crash in Brazil. And this is the story of a group of doctors basically setting a bone for an alien. So let's see how this all happened. So it started off, and again, this is 1996. So the first set of stuff that was really going on was in the 70s, and then this is in the 90s. And a trio of women were taking a walk and took a shortcut home through a vacant lot. And then in a clump of weeds, they encountered a creature like nothing they had seen before. It was not the gray type that has been autopsied. It had 3 knobs on its head and huge red eyes. And the red eyes stuck out to me because I think that in UFO of God, Chris Bledsoe talks about seeing the beings that had red eyes and they glow. So maybe again, this could be a kind of eye covering or like a vision, something that helps them with their vision here. But later in the story, in this particular story, the eyes do seem to be like part of them. So The women described it as horrible looking, brown in color with an oily skin and large head. It had what looked like a set of veins bulging out of the skin on the shoulders and the neck. And then later on, after, because those women just like saw the creature, it turned its head away from them. It didn't want them to look at it, and they all ran home. And then later that same day, an officer found one of these creatures that was injured. I don't know if it was the same one or a different one, but as we're getting into this story, Whitley wants to make the point, and I'm going to quote him again: "It is so important that we see these others in as close to the richness of vision with which we see one another as possible. It isn't easy, of course, given that they are smelly, ugly creatures, and many of them aggressive in bizarre ways. I am not suggesting that we love them, though, but rather that we see them as best we can as the complex, nuanced beings that they must certainly be." So that's just a good thing to always keep in mind. Obviously, we don't want to project meaning onto them based on their appearance, but it's hard when the appearance is really startling, and it might be dangerous. They might be dangerous to us, not because of their intent, but because of their biology. Like, they might carry things that our bodies are not equipped to handle. And as you'll see in this story, the officer who touched this being did become very sick and die. The doctors who worked on it obviously covered themselves in all the proper PPE, and they did not make contact with it directly, and they were all fine. But, these are creatures from who knows where, and they're different. They're very, very different. So, this is Officer Marco Eli Charisse, a 23-year-old at the time, participated in the capture. He was the one that picked it up and put it in the car. And the creature mildly resisted, but he got it into the car, and he was dead within 2 weeks. And according to his sister, he had come down with a fever, lost his appetite, became dehydrated, bled out, and died. Now, for some reason, the part about bleeding out kind of shocked me and made me think, like, did she exaggerate that? Like, everything else, I don't know why, but that part I was just like, why was he bleeding? Like, where was he bleeding from? It doesn't really make any sense, but whatever really happened, it was extreme. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks and did not make it. And in the hospital, they found that his blood was contaminated. It contained 8% of unknown toxic substances. So it seems as if he did come into contact with physically something toxic that poisoned him. And I think this is important to talk about, not to be scared, but like, what if you came across an alien being, and you're like really cool and loving and open-minded, and you weren't even trying to capture it, but you just wanted to like help it up off the ground, and you touched its hand, and then 2 weeks later you're dead. It's just like, these are just stories, but maybe they could help someone, so I think they're worth sharing. And this story was very, very well researched, and there were many, many witnesses involved with this particular situation. They were all the doctors and nurses at the hospital. And Dr. Roger Leir is the one that interviewed all of them. Is his first name Roger? Yeah, Roger Leir. Leir. So, pieces of this story. The doctors approached the being carefully to avoid any contamination. The eyes of the Varginha alien were large and red, and they were staring blankly at the ceiling. It wasn't trying to make eye contact with them, and they were not trying to make eye contact with it, but that did occur towards the end of this story. So there's this thing called dead eyes that other people have talked about in their abduction experiences or contact. And so the eyes can be very dead, and then they can like kind of activate and like suck you in. Like, there's this intense connection that happens through the eye contact. So during the procedure, it was doing the dead eye thing, but then at the end of it, once the bone was set, it kind of came online. The eyes were large and slightly upturned, and they looked like two glimmering pools of liquid. This being had 4 fingers, no thumb. The fingers all moved in strange ways, just like the other document talks about with the gray aliens and what Whitley observed with his visitors. So no thumb was needed because they could all articulate. And this was, the height was just below 5 feet. So this isn't like a teeny tiny creature. Sometimes they're like 3 feet tall. This was like just below 5 feet. And they looked at its blood under a microscope, and the blood was similar to human blood, but with a much higher platelet count. I can't tell you what that means in terms of like what it implies because I'm not a biologist. So one of the medical personnel who was interviewed by Dr. Lear said that for some reason all of us did not want to look into this creature's eyes, and we all refrained from doing so. Which is interesting, like an instinctual, like maybe they were just overwhelmed with how different it was. They were scared, or they had a sense that if they did that, something was going to happen because they did not want to do that. And this whole operating room was surrounded by armed soldiers, and the doctors did set the bone. And then when the being's bone was set and it was laying on the table, all of a sudden, this is the craziest, sounds so sci-fi and weird, but just listen to the story. The room began to fill with a green mist, which was emanating from the creature. So the soldiers at that point locked them in, even though they were all watching the operating room from the outside, but they were just like, basically, oh shit, like we don't want that green mist coming out here. What if it's a weapon or something, you know? So they locked them in. The nurses are like banging on the door to get out. And at that moment, one of the doctors approaches the operating table, and then the eye contact happens. He said, without consciously realizing it, my gaze caught the eyes of the being. His eyes were glowing red and appeared as 2 swirling pools of liquid. They were pulling me in deeper and deeper. Information came pounding into my head. These were like thought grams. Large blocks of information over and over, like someone hitting me in the head with a hammer. He became dizzy and nauseated, and he ended up having headaches for 2 weeks. So the doctor would not tell Lear everything that was in these thought grams, but he did tell him what the being said about humans. Humans have the same potential and abilities to perform the very same things his race could do. The being said that in cases of injury or disease, it wouldn't be necessary even to use a hospital. They could either individually or joined together produce any healing that was necessary. They felt sorry for us because we didn't realize that we are spiritual beings only living in a temporary shell, and we're totally disconnected from our spiritual self. This patient was removed from the hospital, as in the alien, by the military and never seen again. So I guess everybody else was fine. The green mist didn't really do anything, but the reason Whitley includes this story is because of what the alien said. It's really about this little part here, that humans have the same potential and abilities to perform the very same things his race could do. The healing was a big part of it. He's like, we don't need hospitals. This was all unnecessary. I could heal myself, or we could join together and heal. Me and my people could join together and heal. And they feel sorry for us because we don't realize we're disconnected. We're disconnected from the spiritual self. So, all right, this gets more into the Reddit document. They are artificial, ephemeral, and disposable organisms created for a purpose that still partially eludes us. The bodies then may not be as central to their experience of reality as ours. Or are these bodies the only kind that they possess? This is questions that Whitley's asking. So a lot of people will say oh, they're just little bio robots, and they're drones, or they're little androids or whatever. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's totally it. And Whitley doesn't have a strong conclusion, I don't think. I think he's looking at all the evidence and asking a lot of questions. He does have his ideas about things, but like I hesitate to lock in on any real understanding because I have no direct experience with it. So for me, I like to think about like what Tom Campbell teaches when he teaches people about connecting with non-physical entities in the consciousness system. So those that do astral travel or out of body or even in dreams, you can meet other beings. And Tom Campbell will say sometimes it is your own subconscious, your own imagination. Sometimes it's the larger consciousness system itself. It can take on any form to have a connection with you, and other times it's another free will awareness unit. No matter what, you have no real way of knowing who they are, no matter what they look like, because in non-physical realms, people can change appearance very easily. And so what you have to focus on is the quality of the communication and the connection. And is it positive? Is it negative? Is it helpful? Is it pulling you out to sea? Like, is it a wild goose chase? So I think that in a way, even though these beings to me seem much more physical and real, they could just be consciousness, the larger consciousness system, creating something potentially. I don't think that's what it is, but no matter what, it's like, how do we treat each other? How do we interact is what matters here. So that's why I don't care that much about like their blood and their genes and how their bodies work and how they excrete. I'm just like, what are we talking about to each other? Like, why are they visiting us? Why are they here? And so the fact that they have messages is the part that interests me the most. And some of the messages seem like nonsense, and some of them seem very important. Some of them seem very repetitive. Some of them seem more specific to an individual. Overall, I do think a conclusion can be drawn based on the spread of different messages that are out there and the fact that many of them do center on like us learning and growing and us taking care of the planet. So Whitley talks about his own experience with his abductions and how there were the good army, he called it. It was like the little beings that were doing stuff, but then there was the manager, like the woman, this female being who managed the good army. And that woman later became a very intimate, if elusive, participant in his life, in his words, and in the life of his family. So he almost had like a loving relationship with this woman, this alien, even though he said like, she was hideous. It wasn't like her body that he was attracted to. It wasn't like a hot alien. It was like a little, I don't know what the body of that alien looked like. I'm assuming it was a gray, but he talked about how she had this like really dominating energy that was like really powerful and intense and almost scary, but also like they had so many like nuanced times of like connecting and sharing. Anyway, it became this really big thing, and he even talked about how like, because he was married and he had a wife, and some other people that have had these contact experiences have been pulled out of their relationships because of it, but he actually maintained his love for both people, his wife and this alien, because they were different and there were limitations to how he could connect with that alien, obviously. And it was like, he was definitely, what's the word I want to use here? He was not in control of that relationship in any way, shape, or form, It was kind of one of dominance, but he treasured that relationship throughout his life, and his wife is now dead, but he still feels like connected to both of them. Okay, let's see. I said read from page 56. What's on? What did I circle? Okay. Okay, yeah, this is like in his words, talking about this woman. I think of her often, of course, and as wonder about our own personal relationship, its meaning, and why it even existed. I wonder if that's a typo, and as wonder. I'm going to reread that I'm going to edit it myself to take out as. I think of her often, of course, and wonder about our own personal relationship, its meaning, and why it even existed. What caused her to fall in love with me, for she certainly did, and then to commit the acts upon me that she did. And what caused me to so enjoy her presence in my life, for just as she loved me, I had powerful, complex feelings toward her. I still do. There was an aesthetic limitation, though. She was far from beautiful, and I had in my bed beside me a lovely, warm wife for whom I felt not just affection, but a towering love that to this day enriches me, even all these years after her passing. His wife is Anne Strieber, and he talks about her a lot. Okay, a little more from here because this gets deeper into it. But this other woman is still with me too, and sometimes the memory is very poignant. Why was I drawn to an ugly, dominating, and emotionally aggressive stranger? So much so that just writing about her, I miss her electric touch and the skillful, dramatic intimacy that she visited upon me. My relationship with her was involuntary, I think. If she came back right now, though, walked in the door, I know exactly what I would do. I would open my arms to her, then think of what she did to me and the tragic boy who may have been the outcome of our intimacy. And I consider that I am more deeply her victim than I am aware of. I think of Stockholm Syndrome, the tendency of a captive to identify with their captors. Was I so dominated by her, I became entrapped in this way? So, I mean, I think that's just it's so beautiful that he's willing to share these very intimate and uncomfortable details about his own experience, because I think they're really, really important for other experiencers who have gone through similar dynamics and just need to feel that they're in the company of experiencers who can relate. And it's a kind of an impossible question to answer. Like, was it an involuntary thing where I just had Stockholm Syndrome, or was there a real love that was mutual? He doesn't really know how to answer that, but he knows how he feels, and he's willing to express the contradictions in all of it, which I think is very intelligent of him. And it's a complex thing. I mean, it just breaks you right open. I think it's wild, and yeah, so wonderful that he's willing to share so much of what he went through. So later on, he gets more into like autism, the hybrids. He met this hybrid that he thought seemed like an autistic person in a lot of ways. He goes into a lot of detail about that. I'm not going to talk all about that here. He talks about the telepathy tapes because that had already been produced by the time he was writing this book. And he talks about like chromosomal differences, like these 16 round chromosomes were found in these beings. And I actually have a friend, Max Rempel, who is a DNA scientist who found my channel, found that we had a mutual interest in the telepathy tapes. He's part of this collective called Hucolo, and they're like the people that are really into like channeling aliens and stuff like that, which isn't totally my thing, but like I like Max, and sometimes I join his webinars to just have discussions about whatever, telepathy, aliens. We kind of go all over the place, and I'm just practicing like connecting with different people and trying to stay very open to like just differing backgrounds and perspectives on these things. But I asked him about these round chromosomes because he understands DNA and he understands these details. And so he was talking about how like in our human chromosomal layout, you know, they're like little straight sticks as opposed to the round ones. I think there's creatures, certain crustaceans and other earth creatures that do have the round chromosomes. Actually, Whitley talks about it in here, and I don't remember what the details were, but actually, where is this in the book? But anyway, I asked him, because I've seen pictures of our chromosomes because of people getting so excited talking about telomeres, because I guess one of the things that makes us age is when our telomeres shorten. And when I see the chromosome, it looks like a little kind of X, but it's kind of long and skinny. I think that's what it looks like. And then the telomeres are like the ends, the little branched off ends of it. But I could be wrong on this. I'm not an expert in this by any means. I don't even study this stuff. So the 16 round chromosomes are interesting because it's another contradiction here. It's like they have certain things in their bodies that make sense, and other things that don't. But Whitley sort of thinks that like maybe this is something that helps them to do all the things that they can do, to have like their abilities. And when I asked Max about it, he did talk a little bit about like the energy that like how energy moves across the chromosomes. So in the long ones, there's actual like almost like an electrical signal going back and forth, but in a round one, it can go a lot faster because it's just not, there's nothing to stop it. It's not like, it's just, you know? So that's my very rough understanding of the chromosomal thing. But what Whitley is talking about in this chapter is the abilities, and maybe some of these could be attributed to their genetic makeup. But I think, you know, from my perspective as someone who studies consciousness, it's much more likely that their abilities have to do with their level of consciousness. And that's based in like all the ancient teachings that are meant to guide humankind towards developing those same abilities. And so therefore, in my mind, it's not about the chromosomes, it's about the consciousness. But these are the abilities. Movement, ultra fast travel with and without a vehicle, unlimited propulsion, gravity control, personal effects, invisibility, levitation, self-healing, form changing, and mental effects, telepathy, mind control, removal of souls from bodies, creation of false memories in others. So let's move it along into chapter 6. Another quote from Whitley: "They are not here because we are weak and easy to exploit, but rather because we are a sleeping giant. The contradictions and conflicts we see among them probably reflect the fact that they are divided about whether or not we should be allowed to awaken." So I think he's trying to guide us out of fear and into this, like, yes, it's complicated. Yes, there are many contradictions. Even he has his own with his own personal experience, but he doesn't think it's all about just them wanting to exploit us. That's not what's going on here. It is about us waking up. And he says, I say that we should wake up and now, and we have the tools. But then he asks the question, wake up in what way and how are we asleep? So then he gets into the Hinduism and Buddhism stuff, this idea of siddhis or accomplishments, which confer additional powers on properly prepared human beings. And then he talks about how this notion of these powers are present in all religions. Catholics call them charisms. In Taoism, they're integrated into Qigong or Qigong. In Islam, they are called karamat. In Jainism, labdi. I don't know. I've never heard of all these different things, but I have talked about siddhis because I did grow up with the Yoga Sutras and teachings that were based in the Yoga Sutras, and that's all about the siddhis. So if you go back into Shock's talks and dig around, you'll find episodes that I've made where I talk all about that. And so this is very validating to me because I did that before reading all of this, and we're all on the same page here. It's like there's evidence here in our culture to show that like these are things that we are meant to be able to do. Maybe we lost them. Who knows why? I think he's going to talk about that in part 2. But there are many blueprints for how to regain them that exist in human spirituality and world religions. Now, while many powers are described by the different religions, they all include healing, levitation, instantaneous movement, and or bilocation. And these are all powers that the visitors display. And remember, the Varginha aliens said that we had lost touch with such powers. So, all right, chapter 7 is called Shadow of the Tiger. This is where he's really talking about what I've said earlier, like based on the fact that people who make contact are often given messages about the environment, environment and nuclear dangers, there is also an ongoing hybridization effort. So based on these two things, they're trying to save us, is what he thinks. Like, they're trying to help us because on the one hand, they're like, first, they're just like preventative medicine. You guys stop ruining everything. Don't kill yourselves. Don't kill the planet. But we're not doing that. So what's the backup measure? Hybridization. Okay, well, we'll preserve what we can of these humans because they might blow themselves up. So we're going to like take their genetic material and try to grow little versions of them, but like maybe blend it with ourselves. Now, other people think that hybridization has more to do with they want to take over and they want to infiltrate, and so they need our genetics to be able to come here. But it's like, oh God, it's such a long-term plan. It's like, who even cares? You know, we're all going to die and like new people will be born. Who cares what their genes are? Or like, I don't know. To me, it's like, I am not worried about that. It's like if alien hybrids take over the earth, like so many years after I'm gone, like what does it matter? Also, if I'm a hybrid or if we're all hybrids now, what does it matter? We're still ourselves living our lives. We still have a spiritual purpose for being here, and we have to deal with whatever we have to deal with. That's our business. You know what I mean? So I think at the end of the day, none of that stuff really matters, but these are indications that there is something going on potentially. And he said these look like the actions of somebody who is trying to save us and going down more than one path towards that objective at the same time. And then he talks a lot about memory and how he has had experiences with them where they were able to give him back a memory of like a time when he was a baby that he could have never recalled in his own memory. And it was almost like he just fully relived it. And it was so beautiful and so perfect. And he really valued that experience. And so he starts kind of speculating again about, like, I wonder if they, you know, have access to all of our memories and they can help us to re-access them. And so anyway, I think he's onto something here. I definitely think he's onto something. But I also think that Tom Campbell and others have talked about being able to access memories in this same exact way when they go out of body or when they have tapped into their consciousness abilities. So, for example, as a regular human in regular reality, living my normal life, I only have so much access to my memories. But if I meditate or have an out-of-body experience and I create an intent to go to a specific time and place in my past, I could potentially relive that moment. And the way Tom Campbell describes it, not just relive it in the way that I experienced it, but actually I'm outside of it. So it's like the Blu-ray experience. It's like you can look at it from all the different angles. You can go into the other person there and see what they were feeling at the time. You could go out the window and look back in the window and watch it all happen from a distance. Like you could look at it from every angle. How cool would that be? Like how much would you love? I would love to be able to do that with certain moments in time, to better emotionally process it and understand it and move beyond it. I would love to have that perspective because I'm sort of trapped in the memory that has been my experience, and that's the only part of it that I can access, and that fades over time and I recreate it and the details change, as we all know. Like that's how memory works. So access to memory is potentially like perfect access to memory. Could be like a psi ability or reading the Akashic records, or it could be something that, according to Whitley, we could have through our connection with the visitors, because they already have that ability, not just with themselves potentially, but like they can pull memories out of us. And he thinks that maybe that's part of why they're here too, that they want to relive things because they are outside of time. He'll get into that later. He talks more about the bodies and just like the disposable nature of the bodies. And, you know, he actually, this part, he says, they are such imperfectly designed vessels that I've wondered if whatever animated them is even native to the physical world. I have touched on the idea that they might be something like diving suits for a creature that is normally not normally physical, but which sometimes needs physical utility. If the cadavers were originally designed to be entered and left at will by such beings, then they might not be only artificial but also disposable, which would be why they have been left behind in crashes. big, complex brains or not, if they are designed to be used only when needed, then they are also expendable. Because when they studied them, they do have like extremely big and complex brains. But the body itself seems a little bit like, what is this? This doesn't even make any sense, at least from our human perspective. Okay, we're almost through the notes. Chapter 8, so very alive, so very dead. He thinks that he thinks that their biggest secret has to do with time. Their great knowledge has removed them from the stream of time, but all knowingness has not provided them the freedom and the safety that they expected. They have instead ended up in a life empty of meaning. They know so much, they cannot be surprised, and that is their agony, and I feel reasonably sure also one of the main reasons to explain their coming here. This is Whitley's words again. For us, inside the stream of time, every moment is new. For them, every moment is inevitable, and that is no life worth living. So if you go to his channel, unknowncountry.com, or if you YouTube him and like search him on YouTube and find interviews and stuff, you'll hear him talking about this. And it is cool to hear him talk about it because you get a sense that like he's really pulling this out of his own experience with them. And all right, let's talk about merging consciousness, because we talk about psi abilities and psychic stuff a lot on this channel, so I know you'll be with me on this. We humans, we already have the ability to merge consciousness. I don't know about you, but like, for example, when I'm in love, I merge consciousness. I just start to know things about them. I feel their feelings. I feel that when I go into a crowd, I start to merge consciousness with the crowd. When I go to work, I merge consciousness with work. When I hang out with certain friends, I start to merge with them. And what I mean by merge is not in the sense that these visitors have. It's not like I'm seeing every crystal clear memory that person has. I'm doing it's more of like a fuzzy version of that. But what I get is it's like my thoughts. It's almost like that magnetic sand or something, or like I'm seeing like an image of like ferrofluids, So there's like magnetic particles in the water, and then let's say that there's like another magnet that is like the people or the work collective psyche or the partner that we're talking about, and it has its own shape, and I'm the ferrofluid, and my ferrofluid starts to change shape, and from that I can extrapolate things about that person or that other consciousness. It's not like it's a reflection, but it's like I'm feeling my own thoughts. The flow of my thoughts is changing when I'm around different people. And I've gotten pretty good at reading that. It's like reading the tea leaves, but it's like you can interpret that over time. And so I know now, because I spend a lot of time alone in order to come back into myself and be like, okay, what's my own consciousness shape? What is my own thought, feeling, place, aura, whatever, like who am I? What am I? Because I feel so influenced by everything and everyone that I'm around. But it's a nice power to have, because you can know a lot about people, especially what they're not saying. You can know so much, and you can tell the difference between like, it just gets very nuanced. And the more you pay attention to it and interpret it, the more it makes sense over time. At first, it's very confusing. If you start to notice that, it's probably something that's happening to you too. And maybe you already notice it, but if you haven't, you might start to notice it just from thinking about it, just from having this idea planted in your mind. And then if you continue to care about that and think about it more, you will begin to interpret it, and you will begin to understand it, and you'll parse out the details, and you'll know like what's going on, what I'm talking about here. But I think when it comes to non-human intelligence, that is something that if we connect to it, it is so different from us. It's so disruptive that like that man in Brazil, that doctor that had the eye contact, he felt like he was getting hit in the head with a hammer. He had headaches for weeks, 2 weeks afterwards. Like it really fucked him up. You know what I mean? And I think that there's probably like a little bit of an onboarding that needs to happen in order for our consciousness to like merge with these other intelligences because they're so radically different, but they're not that different. But they're extremely farther along on this path than we are on a certain path of expanded consciousness. Just like Whitley said at the beginning of this, we shouldn't diminish ourselves or our power. And he does get into like how we, humanity, are like this sleeping giant, and we have a ton of power. We're on the verge of reawakening into that power and that ability. But as we're moving towards it, it's like a rocky, weird path that we're on, and connecting with them. There's going to be major discrepancies in how we both experience reality, and also just like culturally, morally. I mean, I think the reason that so many people in the UFO community are obsessed with autism right now, and kind of the whole world has been for a while, because even before the telepathy tapes, I was seeing all these young kids and people starting to like self-diagnose, like I'm on the spectrum, this, that, and the other, which sure, I think we all are on the spectrum, and we're all in different places on it. But what really extremely autistic people are helping humanity to understand is that we're still souls. We still are here together, even though we have very different ways of operating. For example, the nonverbal folks are like now able to type through the use of these devices, and they can communicate things that they've known all along. They've been here with everybody, listening to what's going on, learning. They have their own perspective. They have things to say. And we were just totally not getting that. We were not getting that at all because of the way they appeared on the outside. Because we didn't know. They couldn't communicate in our way. So we just assumed that they were stupid or they couldn't communicate. That's so stupid of us, obviously. And people that are more close on the spectrum to what you would call neurotypical still have really extreme differences from the quote-unquote neurotypical people, which I think most neurotypical people have actually just been conditioned to be that way. I don't think neurotypical is normal. I think neurotypical is a result of a cultural imposition. Like, we have to mask, we have to be this way. We've been trained into it. But those who are not able to be trained and do not have the ability to mask, just love them so much. Those people, they are showing humanity that, yeah, like this face that I'm making, or the fact that I don't want to do these social niceties with you, it doesn't mean what we would think it would mean, like what we've been taught to think it would mean, because these are all silly cultural overlays. They just feel what they feel, and they think what they think, and their face does what it does, and they're not trying to change it. They're very authentic people, and they're very straightforward. Obviously, we all have a lot to learn to move in that direction. Like, that would benefit everyone. But it's a hard path to get there from the place that society has driven most of the people. And it's a painful prison that most people live in when it comes to these masks. But why did I get off on this tangent? I think, it was because I just wanted to make the point that the reason people in the UFO community are obsessed with autism is because it is a great metaphor. It helps us to begin to understand how to connect with people who are different from us culturally in a way, and also consciousness-wise, and also in terms of like how they communicate. And it's so extreme that like people are just jumping to the conclusion that everyone who's autistic is an alien hybrid and da-da-da-da. It's like, maybe not, like, can't we just have people who are different? Is that so crazy? I think there's definitely a possibility that there are alien hybrids who appear to be autistic humans. I think there's alien hybrids who appear to be regular humans who have learned how to mask. There's that, like, if hybrids are here, they're everywhere, and they're in all categories of people. So I find it kind of silly and annoying, personally, when everyone is just like, those are the hybrids, and now let's all just, it's just like, these are people, and they're people of the earth, and they're people that we live among. Let's just like not over exaggerate. Like, let's not exoticize our own people. We are all here together. If we're living and interacting, we're here together. Like, let's just not be weird. You know what I mean? I'm like, please be chill, people. But who knows? We'll find out once we get more advanced with our science and we can actually detect hybrids. I mean, oh God, I'm so excited about this because actually I need to finish watching this right after I'm done recording this episode, which is probably getting way too long. I'm almost on the last chapter, but Chris Ramsey, who does the Area 52 podcast on YouTube, just posted a video where he's talking to ex-CIA officer John Ramirez, and this man worked I can't remember what his exact title was or like even what his expertise was, but they're going to get into the topic of his knowledge of hybrids. And just the first half of the episode was mostly about like being tasked with what's the word? I'm losing it, people. It was about orbs and needing to like track and document and study a lot of the orb phenomena and like sending out teams to work on that stuff. But he ended up learning about all these different secret programs. And in the teaser for the episode, he was saying like, yeah, hybrids are absolutely here. Like these black programs know about them. They've tracked them. They know where they are, who they are, all this stuff. So I'm like, ooh, I want to find out all about that because I'm very interested in that. But anyway, let's get refocused. Here we go. Final chapter. Chapter 9, Thieves of Innocence. So this starts off with our oldest religious document, which is the pyramid text carved on the walls inside the pyramid of Unas, or Unas. I don't know how they say it. It's a set of instructions for the pharaoh to use on his afterlife ascension to Orion, which involves the activation of an energy system along the spine. Since then, essentially every religion has included an ascension method. Kundalini awakening much? This is what I grew up with, so that's the one I can refer to. They always talked about a snake at the base of your spine, and if you meditated and focused on like the crown or the third eye and you thought about drawing the snake up, it would activate your Kundalini. And it was like a cautionary tale when I was a kid. It was like, don't do that. You're not allowed to do that meditation. Don't you go activating your Kundalini because all hell will break loose, which is so funny because I had a very mild and gentle version of the yogic experience. They were very like modest, I guess, in a way. I don't know. They were just like very like, let's just serve all and love all, be good, do good, just mind your business, do your yoga practices, don't go awakening your Kundalini. Like other forms of yoga are all about awakening the Kundalini, but as we know now, because we have the internet and everyone talks about their awakening experiences, it can be very dramatic and scary and intense. And if you haven't properly prepared in all the ways, awakening that Kundalini can kind of drive you crazy, or like it's almost like they always would say it is like too much power surging through a machine that wasn't meant for that amount of power. It's that kind of thing. So it's interesting to me to know that the oldest religious document, which is carved on the walls of this pyramid, is about that, because I never knew that. So it's exactly about energy going up the spine. So that's like, I'm like, whoa, there's definitely got to be something to that. And that every religion has some idea about ascension. So this gets us back to like what this is all about, which is like, we're going to keep having these visits from these visitors. They want something from us. We need something from them. They might be here to re-experience the present, the feeling of being in the stream of time, which we are. Perhaps they're in a non-physical realm, penetrating back into the physical, using these bodies that have been created for them that they can come into and leave at will. But that's also why we can have these astral experiences with them, because we can all be outside of physical reality together. But in order for us to access all the powers that we once had or that are innate in us, we have to go through an ascension process, and perhaps they can be the midwives to that process. So like it's all starting to come together a little bit, right? So He talks about the Tibetan Book of the Dead and how it has intricate blueprints of how to live and to die and how to negotiate the afterlife. He talks about like how in Western religious cultures you can like get baptized and then you live a moral life, or you know, whatever. It's like there's all these ideas of like how to be in order to face death and have a good experience after. So we're all heading towards death. We know that. But what do we do here to make the most of that? And that's kind of what this whole thing in the pyramid was about. And he talks about starting in the Renaissance when Roman author Lucretius wrote the great poem On the Nature of Things. This is when a secular version of reality emerged. So I'm no history buff. I want to be better. But apparently, according to Whitley Strieber, this was a turning point in the Renaissance. And so we know that like at this moment in time, or like even from then on, you know, Western thought began to turn away from invisible presences such as souls, ghosts, angels, demons, fairy folk, and all the rest. And we all know that we live in a culture that totally denies that stuff for the most part, but now that we have subcultures because of the internet, there's a lot more like open discussion of these things, and it's even like in pop culture, and we have things like the Upside Down and Stranger Things. We have like this new Pixar movie coming out, Elio, like about alien abduction, that I really want to see. It looks really, really cute. The Pixar did that movie Soul, which was actually like incredible if you haven't seen it. So I guess I'm bringing up these pop cultural references because we're not really living in a time where we deny the soul. I think we live in a time when we all are pretty open to the concept of the soul. But let's keep going, you know, like let's keep fanning that fire, and like how far can we go with that? Because that's what's going to get us back to those powers and abilities. And he talks about how this whole turning point, you know, unfortunately was driven by a desire to break out of the religious dictatorship that had ruled Europe for nearly 1,000 years. The Western intellectual community ends up entirely rejecting the idea that consciousness could exist in any way outside of the biology that supports it. That's been a dominant way of thinking for a long time. Like consciousness is in the brain, you know, and now like that almost became like a new religious dogma, but it was like this non-religious dogma. And I said, read from page 100. What did I circle? What did I underline? What did I highlight? Boop, where is it? Okay. Okay, so he's referring back to the Reddit document again. The document suggests that our visitors take quite a different approach, which is essentially the same as that of our old religions, but without any of the mystical trappings. To understand the significance of this, one has only to consider the statement made by the being at Varginha. He felt sorry for us because we had lost skills such as the one he was using to heal himself. When you strip away the forms of gods and demons and angels and so on without entirely rejecting the reality they are meant to explain, what you have left are energetic states that appear to be quite real. Apollo or Ra or Yahweh or any of our deities represent powerful inner states, which we can see and use within ourselves if we cease to regard them as personalities external to our own being. Seeing gods as inner states that give rise to the folklore of deity will reveal their real power, which is hidden within us. Ooh, I really like that. And then, wrapping it up here, the fundamental question of contact may be this: can we share our experience of the new with them even as they share their total knowledge with us, without both sides losing their footing in reality? When they enter the time stream, will they forget the timelessness that is their home and their safety? When we leave it, will we lose the newness that is our reason for living? In order to gain what both sides want from our relationship, we must somehow square the circle, but in opposite ways. If we manage it, that will be, in the truest sense, communion. This is all Whitley's words, as it has been this whole time, just in case that wasn't clear. Communion. This is the name of his book, Communion, and this is why he called it that. I'm going to read that part again. In order to gain what both sides want from our relationship, we must somehow square the circle, but in opposite ways. If we manage it, that will be, in the truest sense, communion. We will have to admit the other into ourselves so completely with such total surrender that we will each become both. So this is that idea of the merging. So it's like to connect with them is to merge because of the nature of their consciousness and maybe their bodies. That part, I don't, whatever. But like their consciousness is so different from us. And as soon as we connect with them by like making eye contact or having a out of body experience with them or just using our intent to connect to them consciously, we start to merge. And I think they're already here and it's already happening subtly. Like it's seeping into the collective psyche because there's a presence, there's been a presence and that presence has increased over time. We've seen the history, like we've seen the sighting history, like it's a lot is going on and a lot has been going on since the 40s. So yes, ancient aliens, yes, there was stuff. This is what Richard Dolan always talks about. Like there's these random sightings throughout history that could be related to this, but there's a very probable physical presence of aliens visiting Earth that started around the 40s that has like continued a persistent, ongoing presence. So of course, whether or not you're having direct contact, that's influencing you, in my opinion. So what do you think? What do you think of Whitley's ideas here? Do you think it's worth connecting to these beings? Would you do it? Would you connect to an entity? Would you have an alien friend? Would you open yourself to understanding this timeless, this being who is outside of the stream of time? He says for both sides there will be dangers and fears, but when we come together as a community of mind, we will both achieve what we seek. We must find our innocence and bring it with us. And one more. Oh, that's the wrong page. One more little thing from here before. Okay, I like this. Now remember when Matthew Brown from the Immaculate Constellation interview said, we live in a carefully constructed reality? It's so funny because I watched a Mission Impossible movie after that, and there was a line from that movie where they said, we live in a carefully constructed digital reality. And I was like, did Matthew Brown just watch Mission Impossible? Like, what happened? Why did he say that? But I think it's innocent. I think it's honestly just the truth. We live in a carefully constructed reality. Whitley says we live in an illusion, a game really. The future may be largely ordained, but as long as we don't know that, we gain self-knowledge from our experiences exactly as if they were truly new. Having the illusion destroyed by being drawn out of the time stream is why we fear the visitors so deeply. Being cast onto the shores of the river is for us swimmers a loss of innocence so profound that it is literally a fate worse than death. Our visitors would seem to know this. This would be another reason that they are so careful not to come too close to us. In our coming relationship, balance is going to be absolutely essential. Okay, that's it for part 1. In the next part of the book, this is his final, how he wrapped up the final chapter. He says, in the next part of the book, I will deal first with the difficulties we have with memory, then explore the nature of what I think are the powers we have lost and why and how we can recover them by looking at our own minds and our past in a new way. And part 2 is called Finding Our Liberty. So I will be reading and taking my notes, and I will be sharing again. Thanks for listening to this. It's so interesting, isn't it? And I will say, I don't talk all the time about my personal experiences, but because it's too weird. Like, honestly, because it's like almost embarrassing. And I think a lot of experiencers can relate. And that's why I think the courage that it takes for someone like to come forward and really open up and share, but also to be able to reflect in such a meaningful way. Like, this book is a treasure. Whitley Strieber, as a human on the earth who is still with us today, is a treasure. And I think we should all support his work. Go to his website, unknowncountry.com, go to his YouTube channel, listen to him speak. Like, these are our people. We are each other's family on the earth, you know? Like, and cosmically, we all are. But like, what is better in life than to just love and honor each other and each other's life's work, you know? So, I don't know. Just check it out, you know? Read his book if you like to read, and if not, listen to like one of his talks or something. He's doing a lot for us. He's doing a lot with his life, and I really value that. And I thank you, Whitley Strieber. Thank you so much. See you guys next time on Shock's Talks.